Hey bestie, and welcome back to another episode of the podcast. This week we did an interview with Kink, and I'm actually re-recording this intro so that I can add it on there because it was supposed to come out on Thursday. It's going to come out on Sunday afternoon. I had an allergic reaction earlier this week, so even though we recorded days in advance and it should have been out on time, the same day I was supposed to start recording, I ended up getting super sick. This is your reminder to not always trust the pharmacy. Double check medications because I had a doctor prescribe me some medication and I got super sick from it wasn't an allergic reaction, it was just a bad reaction. But I took the medication, got super sick, and when I called about it, they were like, "Oh yeah, because you have Crohn's, you're not supposed to take this at all." And even though my Crohn's medication comes through that same pharmacy, it's also on my file that I have Crohn's. At the doctor that sent this in, it still somehow got sent in, and yeah, didn't go well. So just a reminder to check everything. That kind of threw off my entire week. I know there's probably still a couple of things that I'm forgetting to do too. I also want to apologize to my YouTube followers because a couple of the newer episodes, for some reason, it kept saying I got an email from YouTube saying there was a corruption issue or something with the file, and it did not upload even though it's on every other platform. I'm going to make sure I get that fixed. That way this one goes out on time. It's already late, but next week's goes out on time. I apologize. I am a hot mess. I just dropped the microphone. But we covered a lot of different aspects of kink education and kink within the community, normalizing things. In this interview, I'm going to go ahead and jump right into that and go and start playing it. We also ended up in a whole conversation about Twilight, and I know some of you guys are going to roast me for the fact that I've never seen it. I'm going to apologize in advance now. I'm sorry. Let's jump right into the interview. So, give it a sec, and then I'll go ahead and ask you to introduce yourself. Okay, we're going to go ahead and start the interview. I already did my introduction for you guys. If you would like to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Princess Rara, and I am the founder of Kink, which is all about empowerment through education. We've got a weekly podcast. We have our Pink Kink Institute, which has online classes. And we even have our Pink Kink Boutique, which is our Etsy store where we sell video on demand classes and workbooks and worksheets to help you learn and grow in your kink journey.
And I absolutely love that's one big thing I want to talk about today is talking about education online. So I teach in-person classes and I love that there is education online nowadays, but there's also I don't know really what a lot of people call it different things. The 2020 boom that happened with that had a lot of it, not just fandom space. We've talked about this in fandom space. We've talked about it in furry space, but it also happened within the kink world where so first we had 50 Shades of Grey, which caused a big boom, which was alarming. It was nice that it was being regularized, but also at the same time, 50 Shades of Grey is not a good representation at all, to put it nicely. But there's also 2020 where everybody was just locked in. People were trying new things, but it was a mixture of there was good information, but also bad information. Like, I'm not sure if you saw the belt trend.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
As a former ER worker and as a kink educator, that absolutely terrified me. The amount of people who were like, "Yeah, let's try this," and it's like, "Oh, let's not," because we're talking about cutting off circulation, nerve damage, at worst, even losing a hand. And I think that's why it's so important to talk about kink safety and educating yourself, and not please don't just try. For everybody listening, please don't just try something because you saw it on TikTok.
Yeah, please,
I know
please don't.
sometimes it
TikTok.
looks good, but
I warn people all the time, if you think 50 Shades was problematic, that is nothing compared to the problems of the TikTok world
oh
and
yes.
what that's bringing in. And I say that as somebody who discovered kink because of 50 Shades. But I just was at least smart enough to go, okay, this is fiction. Now let me go look at what's real.
My thing that I think is most ironic about 50 Shades, other than like the very unrealistic things of it, but one thing I always find ironic is the power dynamic in that, because I've done pro-domi work for over a decade, and most of the time the super powerful guys are the ones that are actually submissive because they want to take a break, because it's not a lot of people think, oh, kink sex, and it's not all about sex. There's a lot of different aspects, and a lot of the super powerful men that would be like Mr. Grey usually are hiring dominatrix to shut their brain off for a day. So I always thought that I'm like, why can't we get a movie with the other way around? Like, why is the guy always got to be the dominant one?
Well, here's the thing to look at as 50 Shades. 50 Shades is actually a romance novel that had a kink component to it. And I say that as somebody who's been a romance reader for 50 years, give or take. And that's the problem. People, if you really understood it, you understand it is a romance book. Here is this young, hot, sexy guy who is a billionaire who flies his own plane, drives his own yacht. I mean, all these things which are very common in a romance book.
And
And he
didn't it
falls
originally
in
start
love.
as a fan fiction too?
It's a fan fiction of Twilight.
So ironically, I've never read Twilight. I've seen the first movie. My friend tried to get me to do it. I had a friend in high school who was like super obsessed with it, and it got to the point. You know how somebody will like shove something down your throat so much that you're like, okay, well now
Yes.
I can't enjoy it. So I never got around to watching or reading it because she would not stop talking about it. She had the initials. So her ex boyfriend's initial was E. Or sorry, no, her ex boyfriend's initial was J, and then her initial was B, and her current boyfriend's initial was E. So she like thought she
I
was in
see.
the book,
Yeah.
and it's one of those things where it's like I want to enjoy it, but you've talked about it, and like she kept being like, "I'm the real life Bella," and I'm like, "Okay, buddy."
Uh,
Like,
yeah, I was a Twi mom. I was very much into it. I admit it really, but I'm a romance fan, and so I've been reading this stuff for years. So when I read 50 Shades, it I never took it as anything other than a romance, which
and
happened to have. And now it's got the BDSM and romance has just skyrocketed to the point that, and because I know there's so many others like me who read these books and now want to try this for real, I got into educating romance readers specifically as well. So I work very closely with an organization called Smut Lovers, who
I
is about
will say
education.
if you are a smut lover and you are listening, if you haven't seen Books a Million just released a Loungefly collection of smut themed book bags. So they have one that says like
Ooh.
spicy book inside and stuff like that. I just saw it last night. I was so excited because I love reading. I've got a whole home library. I love writing and reading smut. I'll fully admit, like I was that person back in the day when we had like fanfiction.com and stuff like that.
Mhm.
When you used to have to label it like lemon and things.
Yeah, well, what's cool about the Smut Lovers organization is it's about educating authors. So I've gone to the conference every year and I teach classes on kink to these writers. And I teach it so that it can keep the fantasy of the romance novel, but still keep it based in reality. And um, they also have videos of every class. So if you can't go to a particular class, you can see the videos. They're really going out of their way to make sure that authors are educating about it because I was the keynote speaker this past year. And one of the things I talked about is you have to understand the responsibility you have for what you write.
Exactly. And I absolutely love the concept of authors knowing more realistic things and having that mixture of fantasy and reality because especially as someone who is autistic, I one thing I really struggle with reading is I would love reading these things, but then it would say something that just didn't make any sense or was super unsafe, and I'd like my brain would not be able to enjoy the rest of it. It would just focus on that. And I've met a lot of autistic readers who are like, yeah, I love these books, and then they'll say something that's like, wow, that's super dangerous. Like I remember reading one fan fiction. It was like a 10-page fan fiction one time, and I got like 7 pages in, absolutely loved it. And there's a point where they were like, oh, I picked up a Bath and Body Works candle and then poured it on them, and I was like, oh, my brain immediately was like, oh my gosh, so this ended in an ER trip, right? Like,
Yeah, that's the problem. I mean, I beta read for a couple of authors. So I read the books long before they're published, and I will go through and I'll be okay, what you're talking about is Florentine flogging. That's what that skill's called. So you can use the proper terminology. Or I'll be he didn't really negotiate. Like he asked for consent in the middle. That's not good. You want him asking for consent at the beginning. And so they'll rewrite their scenes based upon my feedback because I get it. You know, you want to have the fun in the fiction, but you also want to make sure that when the person is who's reading it tries it at home, They're not hurting themselves.
Exactly. That is another big thing I see that I've covered in education even before I started teaching classes in person, because I mostly teach couples, and sometimes we will have singles, but it's mostly couples that come in, especially polyamorous couples, and we talk about safety and consent and negotiation and limits and things like no harm, no foul. Now I've heard different people call that, and that's one thing I wanted to ask you is, I know depending on the area you're in, what people call the no harm, no foul. So for us, what we call no harm, no foul is kinks that are like, let's say a submissive likes to be spanked, or sorry, a dominant likes to spank, but a submissive's not into that. What they'll do is they'll get something like a cloth flogger. Sorry, I said fogger, flogger, and use something like that so it simulates the act for the dominant, but it's not harming the submissive since they're not into that. And negotiating things like that, and different swap outs. And now we call that no harm, no foul here, but I've heard people call it all kinds of different things, all over the country.
I'm based out of Washington, D.C., and I have never heard that term before. And I've never heard anybody talking like even in kind of like that range. If you don't like something, then we'll find another way that of what you do like. So I've never heard like a specific thing to it, because one of the things that we like to teach is harm is possible in absolutely every fucking thing we do, whether it be physical harm, mental harm, emotional harm. So we would never, try to introduce it like no harm, because even with a flogger, a cloth flogger, there's things that can happen. So
And that's the mental harm is something that I have had to discuss so many times too, because I've had so many people who come in and they're like, "Oh, well, it's not physically harming me to reenact this," but then they'll talk about how for days, and they'll think, "Oh, well, that's a normal drop," and I'm like, if you're having issues, if it's bothering you for days mentally, that's coming into that field of more harm than just a regular drop. And that's a lot of people think, "Oh, it's," and that's the thing about dropping is a lot of people don't quite grasp the difference in dropping and actually doing mental, like having a long lasting effect. And they'll kind of brush it off as dropping. As especially, I've noticed a lot of dominants will, because dom drop doesn't get talked about as much. I've noticed, especially online, I see so much of it where people talk about submissive drop, but they don't talk about dom drop a lot. And it's important to have aftercare for both sides of it too.
definitely. One of the things that for me personally, I only joined TikTok probably 2 years ago. It's the bane of my existence. I hate it with a
Oh,
passion,
yeah.
for many, many reasons. But one of the reasons is that I very much see in the post this mentality of the submissive as a victim, or the submissive as the weak person who needs to be taken care of. And I hate that.
Oh, yeah. I
I,
see.
I despise that concept. If a submissive cannot stand up for themselves, then they shouldn't be doing this. They
Exactly.
need to be able to speak up. And the other problem with TikTok, of course, is popularity has nothing to do with whether anybody actually has any real knowledge.
Oh, that is a very large problem I've watched for several years. We actually had a somebody who was local to me who had been kicked out of the scene, and for safety reasons. Very much he'd blown up during the 2020 bang, and he took it as, okay, well, I can do whatever I want. Everybody wants me because of parasocial relationships, and that's sadly, I actually watched a amazing creator who he still teaches locally. He still teaches kink education. He's done it for over 20 years. He's all over the country. He's taken classes, mentorships, and he does all kinds of stuff. He ended up leaving TikTok because of the parasocial relationships people were getting with him. Ended up making him super uncomfortable. He would get comments like, "Oh, I want to be your submissive." And he's like, "You don't even know me. Like, you really don't. I'm just a person behind a screen." He would get inappropriate messages and things. I mean, it was so bad. We sat down and he showed me some of it. Got to the point where he left TikTok. But the other issue we had was somebody blown up during 2020. They had done a lot of the I don't want to say cosplay, but like the now you see like on Spice, there's like the mask men and stuff like that you see
Yes.
nowadays. He'd done a lot of stuff like that, gotten popular, and he was doing a lot of the things he was seeing on TikTok, like the belt trend and stuff like that was unsafe. And then he decided to go into the dungeon scene and thought, okay, well, I'm popular and everybody wants to be online, so I can just do whatever I want here. And that is not the case. I promise you will be removed so quickly if I have to remove you myself. Like it's just come in and try to, trying to play with everybody and stuff without consent, without having conversation. And he, like a lot of people online, where he comes online and he's like, oh, well, I'm the victim in this, like they kicked me out and I don't know why, like they, and doing the whole, and this is one of the toxic mentalities I've seen even before TikTok of, oh, well, a true submissive is submissive to anybody and they're gonna, because I'm a real dominant is what he would claim and stuff. And sadly I see a lot of that, especially with the online boom of people thinking that, okay, if you're dominant, then you get to do whatever you want, and that the submissives are supposed to do whatever. And that's, like you said, why it's important for submissives to be able to communicate and speak up for yourself, and important to make sure you're in that right headspace to be able to speak up, and communicate for yourself, because there's sadly a lot of people that try to take advantage of submissives, especially with that boom online. Now, in person, I've noticed that most houses, most dungeons, at least in my area and places I've been, there's safety regulations set up. There's different things put in place. We have things like, house safe words and stuff to for protection. But online is, especially TikTok, is just like, I don't know what to compare it to, like Mad Max basically. Like it's just no man's land, and you see a lot of stuff. I recently saw a story of somebody talking about how they're still in therapy because of an experience they had, after meeting somebody off of TikTok, and they had gotten all their education off of TikTok, had never taken like any actual classes. They had just watched some TikTok videos, had tried some things, and it ended up with them in the hospital, and they're still facing therapy after just one scene.
I've had people argue with me online telling me I'm wrong when I'm like, okay, but I just literally did this in the dungeon on Saturday night. So what do you mean it doesn't happen? I had a one creator in particular who must have made about 4 or 5 posts about me talking about the fact that I had completely made up the term platonic kink and no such thing existed.
Oh my god. And that
And I'm
rolls
like,
back to what I said, like kink is not just sexual.
I'm like, what have I been doing for the last 10 years?
Right? And that's, like I said, it's like no man's land online. You see so much, and it's crazy because there's also, like you said, you do classes online, and I've taught some classes online. There's a lot of the stuff that I teach, it's easier for me to have somebody in person, and safer, to have visual instructions, because a lot of people learn by seeing and stuff. And of course I also have to explain to people that when I say by seeing, I'm not, the amount of people who online, they hear that and then they think I'm like having an orgy or something in these classes, and that is not the case at all. Everybody's clothed, like it's, I don't know why there's that misconception. But online, I there is a great potential to have amazing resources and help people, especially because there's a lot of people who live in the middle of nowhere. There's a lot of people who also live in areas like I do, where I live in Central Texas, so there are plenty of kink spaces here, but there are people in like rural areas or the deep south that don't have access to that. But then at the same time, they're overflown with people who, like you said earlier, the popularity that people take it as, okay, well, this person's got 500,000 subscribers, so they must know exactly what they're talking about, when realistically they Googled something or something looked cool to them and they did it. And you've got, 50 people that watch that video. Well, a lot more than 50 people watch it, but you got 50 people that saw it and tried it, and it ended up doing harm.
No, that's actually why I really started Pink Kink in the first place. Is I was listening to other kink podcasts, and it's not that they weren't great, but everything was relationship based. Everything was DS based, and it didn't look anything like the way that I was kinking. I always describe it. My friends go to the dungeon on a Saturday night and kink the same way other people go with their friends to go bowling or go to the movies. Like that's our activity. And my friends and I kink with each other. So while yes, they're naked and my hands are on them, it's like there's nothing sexual about it. There's no orgasm that's going to happen. I'm spanking them on their naked ass with my hands. And so that's when I started Pink Kink, and then the podcast. And then I would talk to other people and realize classes were really hard for them to get to because, again, like they were living in the middle of nowhere, or maybe they do have children, and getting childcare to go to these classes was really hard. So that's when I started the institute. So at least there were online classes that they could easily take. And then people were like, well, I wanted to take that class, but I couldn't that night. So I started to record them. And we started the institute where we offered them as video on demand. So you could watch them at your own pace whenever you wanted and over again. So you could really get good notes, and then started putting workbooks and other stuff. So it just kind of evolved as I saw holes that needed to be filled. Because I teach in person, I teach virtually, and then of course I teach through the workbooks and that kind of stuff. Because as any way we can get education to people, I'm like,
Exactly.
I will help you.
And that's the thing with the online too, is the, like I said, it's this great resource that could potentially, except for TikTok, that could potentially be helping so many people. And like you said, with childcare, and also as educators, sometimes it's hard to find spaces, especially if you're in the South. There's been a few times me and a few other educators have booked somewhere to teach a class, and then the local areas, they end up finding out. And especially because I live in a very conservative area, like I drive over an hour, and then the ATX area is super open. Their city logo is Keep Austin Weird, so that's not a problem in this area. But like in my area, to teach locally, it's almost impossible to find somewhere too, because we've had educators get together and like, hey, we want to teach a class locally, especially because the military base. um the rumors, I will say, the rumors people hear about like the military base having a large amount of swingers and kinky people is very true. But a lot of times it's hard for them to make it an hour out for a class. And we've tried to book in this area, and there's a lot of times, especially being in such a conservative area, they either won't approve us or they will approve us, and then the venue cancels on us. Even the local, we have adult stores here locally who they like sometimes they'll even host in the back of their store. They'll have like a room set up or rent out the store for the night to be able to help educators be able to get that information out there. Because once again, it comes down to safety. A lot of times the safety, and also de-shaming it, basically, making people feel more comfortable. I've had so many couples who have came into classes, and they'll share with me afterwards, like I have a little thing where they can anonymously, and sometimes they'll just walk up to me, give feedback. And a lot of them talk about how they've wanted to do these things in their relationship, but they, especially once again living in a conservative area, they felt a lot of shame in it. And they're always told, oh no, you just for just it's sex only. And that's not the case. Like you said, there's plenty of platonic. I've had platonic play partners, that I've, we're not, there's no, like you said, there's no orgasm involved, there's no actual intercourse involved. I've also had quite the opposite. Snapchat is the bane of my existence. It's almost worse than TikTok, because I do use Snapchat to communicate with people on my spicier channels. That's like um part of my subscription on there, is if somebody subscribes on there, I let them go onto my Snap, because some of these sites are getting more. It's ironic because it's an adult site, but then they're like limiting what you can say and stuff on there when you talk about kink or different things. So, and it's like, well, this is an SW website, so why am I being limited? I can't say the word penis. Like, make it make sense. But uh I'll have random people add me on there, and because I won't realize it's random, and I have to delete them. And the amount of people who will come up and be like, oh, well, I want a mistress, I want this and this and this, and it's 100% sexual. And I'm like, what the kid that's not what this is for. And I've had to explain, and they're like, well, isn't all kink sexual? Isn't that what a dominatrix is for? And I'm like, well, almost 99% of professional dommies, I know there's a couple that do other stuff, and they do full service, but that's separate than the actual dommy work for them.
I
Oh,
dated a pro
can you
dom
hear
for
me?
3 years, and
I apologize to the listeners. This is going to be it's going to have a little gap in it. It's because we had technical difficulties. Um, but
technology is great when it works.
right, we've got AI that's passing for real people, but we can't even get the basic Google call to work right. um,
It's
But
okay.
I had said something
Oh, we're
about
talking about
the
pro
thing.
doms. We were talking about
Yeah.
pro doms. So
Um.
I dated a pro dom for about 3 years, and I've done some pro dom work myself. And I will tell you, sex was not on the table, because if sex was on the table, we could get arrested for
Exactly.
prostitution.
Speaking of, that is one thing I like to remind people of because I covered this a few episodes ago, just in basic. Because we were talking about conventions. Because of the online popularity, I'm not sure if you're aware of this. I don't know because this is like anime convention related, but it flows into the kink world. There was a um, a boom of women who were they would walk around cons, and because this is another thing is I do want to remind everybody to please be careful because there's also a guy who goes around to cons and asks women to step on them, and these women, especially a lot of them are like 18, 19 years old, do not understand that that is a kink, and they're like, oh yeah, we'll take a silly photo of me stepping on you, and I have to explain to them that is a kink, that is why he's asking you to do that. And I've stepped on people at cons, at an 18 plus con, like, because there's a certain convention that at 11 o'clock it turns 18 plus, and I have a sign. It's like, and we joke around, consensual. I ask, we go around, being silly at this, and it's an 18 plus event. We get consent, ask everybody. But there was a lot of con going women who did not understand that that was a kink, and they were walking around with signs that say, and there's even videos of this on TikTok, and that's how it got popular. Once again, everything seems to boil back to TikTok. TikTok had made this popular. They were like, oh, $5 to pay me $5 to step on you. And some of these women were finding themselves in legal trouble because, depending on the state you're in, that is considered prostitution. And so there were cops who were, they're waiting till the end of it because a lot of them are recording it. They're waiting till the end of the con, and then they ended up getting arrested, or they'd get back home and they ended up arrested. And the cops were using those videos as proof. Hey, you were prostituting because depending on the state you're in, that is considered prostitution. And they did not seem to understand. I know, once again, it boils back to TikTok. People thought it was just a silly trend, and I'm like, no, that's a kink. There's a lot, and I have a mutual, Bucky. He does videos talking about what is secretly fetish content, because there's a lot of fetish content online that people don't realize, and they're like, this is such a weird video, why are they doing this? And he's like, he'll come on the screen, he'll be like, here's today's episode of, is this fetish content or not? And he explains, yes, this is fetish content, is why you see these silly videos, because so many people are like, I don't know why this person's cracking an egg over their feet or something, and I'm like, it's fetish.
I've done foot sessions where I played with food with my feet and filmed it and sent it to the client.
You would be, a lot of people, well, I mean, I know you wouldn't be surprised, but a lot of people are surprised at how many people have foot fetishes. I mean, I
It's huge, and a lot of people don't even necessarily consider themselves part of the kink community with their foot fetish. It's like its
it's so
own
common.
thing.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, and that's another thing that I have to warn people about online, is there's a lot of people who will be like, oh, this person asked to see my feet and I don't know why, on TikTok. So they'll do like videos showing off their feet, and they're like, I don't know why you wanted to see my feet or my toenails, and I'm like, that's kink, that's a fetish. That's There was like a party princess one too. There was a guy going around asking women to, it was like to fluff their dress. I had one of them do it to me too, because I volunteer and go to the hospital twice a year, the children's hospital, and do the princess performances, because I did princess parties like 10 years ago when I was younger. And I still have the dresses from it. And they'll go around asking, like, oh, can you fluff up your dress and sit down? And the women were not realizing what was going on. And finally somebody came forward and was like, hey, I just want to let you guys know that's what he's asking for. And they're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. And I'm like, yeah, sadly, once again, it's like Mad Max on there. And you see a lot of it, people not being educated, not knowing. And some of it's, once again, it boils back to the shame. There's a lot of people that grew up in households or in areas that it was considered shame and sinful and horrible, and all sexual and all that kind of stuff, and that's why people get afraid to, I mean, we went to Austin Kink one year, and I remember I was walking into the building, and there was like protesters, like church protesters, who were telling me I was going to go to hell. And I'm like, okay, well, please show me in the Bible where Jesus said that I had to only do missionary style and stuff like. And once again, it's not all sexual too. Just in general, they were just out there yelling to yell. It's very common, unfortunately. I mean, we even have that at anime cons. We've had people screaming at protesters at anime cons, telling us we were heathens and going to hell for cosplaying. And I'm like, okay, buddy.
Yeah, thankfully that's not something I've ever had a problem with. I was grew up in a very open-minded background, and I was always one of the first people to be like, "Oh, just do whatever you want, be you."
See, that's the household I grew up in. My mom actually taught. She's taught at Kink education for over 50 years, and she's been in the community. I grew up in a pagan household. I'm not pagan, but I grew up in a pagan household. So she was always open about like accepting everybody else, and then because she was in an open relationship and a kink educator, she was always open about those kind of things too. Not like oversharing. To be clear, I don't want anybody to think I was like 5 years old and knowing like what this stuff meant. But like once I got older, explaining things to me and always open about that kind of stuff. But I also grew up in an area where it wasn't so common, so I saw the other side of it. Especially when I visit grandparents, I'd hear the comments of people. And I think what I think is funny is the a lot of the people that have, once again, like I said, I have people that come to me at the end of class and are like, yeah, I grew up in this household where it's so super shameful, but we're taught, now that I'm older, I want to learn and educate myself and explore with my partners or partner or even friends, like if it's platonic. But I remember as a kid, I thought it was so crazy that a lot of the ones that were super like conservative about things and super like, oh, it's a sin or whatever, a lot of times were swingers. I found out when I think I was about 16, I was at a friend's house and I found out that I had a family member who was a swinger, and I watched her go to a group. And as they're like all going into this building for their swinging party, I was trying not to laugh because I'm like, these are all people that I watched throughout my whole childhood tell me that like all of this stuff was demonic and that it was horrible and sinful and evil, and I'm like, and I just watched all of you go into a swinger party. Like, I'm just like very confused here. A little confusing. I will say I do one thing about education that I think is a little bit funny is all of the hidden signals, because I I've had so many people like the upside down pineapple stuff and things like that. And I've had so many times where I've accidentally been doing hidden meetings and I'm not a swinger and I did not know. And there's a lot of people like that. And I think I'm like, well, that's just another like way to encourage people to get educated, because that way you're not accidentally giving signals or something, you know? I just use it as like a silly way to try to get people to educate themselves, because they'll be like, oh, I didn't know that the pineapple. And I was like, well, now you have a reason to kind of educate yourself now.
Gotta watch out for those pineapples.
Right. It's so crazy because my mother-in-law's house is covered in pineapples because she loves Hawaii, and she's always talking about, she's like, when I go on vacation, couples are so weird to us. And I'm like, oh gosh, how
I
do I have
wonder
this?
why.
I'm like I'm like, how do I have this conversation with her? Because she is like my husband's 8 years older than me, and she also waited till she was in her late 30s, so she's a much older woman. Um and I don't know how to bring up with her, because she's, every time she goes on vacation, she's like, oh, I have all these pineapples on my stuff, and she's like she's always collecting pineapple stuff, and she's like, I don't know why all these couples are weird to me on vacation. And I'm like, I don't know how to tell her it's because you're signaling swingers.
Oh goodness. Yeah, it's I am very fortunate. It's also one of the reasons that I kind of went into the education and doing all the stuff that I do, because I didn't have to deal with that shame. It's very easy and normal for me to just talk about the stuff without any problem. I'm neuronormative. I have zero social anxiety. So I'm very comfortable with doing all this, and I love the in-person classes. I mean, online classes are great, but there is something special about in-person classes and having people give you feedback. My favorite ones is I teach a class on ethical bratting, because I love being a brat, and I'm a brat dominant. And I love blowing people's minds and changing their minds about bratting. They think bratting is this horrible, awful thing. And by the time I finish the class, they'll come up, they're like, wow, I never looked at bratting that way. I really I'm changing my mind now. I'm not going to be so adamant about refusing to play with brats. And I love that. I love making a difference.
I love that you brought up bratting because, oh gosh, I hate that this keeps circling back to TikTok. I swear, like everything that needs to be bunk leads back there. But and I just had a friend that went through this. She reached out to me because she was talking about she's been dealing with a lot of this in person. She is a brat submissive, and there was this boom on TikTok that made it so people thought brats were something that needed to be like conquered, almost like a quest, and that they needed to be corrected. And a lot of them like were, oh my gosh, it reminded me of like frat bros, of having this idea of like, oh, you need to break a brat or anything like that. And that's not what brat, that's not, if you want to have a brat as a submissive, that is not how you handle it at all. But there's a lot of misconception out there because of all these videos and it getting popular, where they were like, basically I said, like frat bros, making it like a little game of, they thought it was a conquest to break a brat or anything or something like that. And it's really sad to see, um like how many people are having to deal with the consequences of that, or the aftermath of that, because that is not the case at all.
No. Well, part of the problem is when bratting is shown on social media, they're only showing one kind of bratting, which is what I call the make me brat,
Yes.
where it's like, you have to make me do this. And they don't realize that bratting is an entire spectrum. I don't like make me brats for me personally. You get to do you, but that's not who I like to interact with. You want to be sassy, you want to be sarcastic, you want to challenge me, bring it on. I love that. Bratting is a way to communicate. You could say to somebody, hey, could you hit me a little harder? That's one way. Or you could also say, wake me up when the warm up is over.
Oh yeah.
Right? It's just it's more fun. I like my scenes to have laughter. I want everybody laughing. We call it play. We're supposed to be happy. I want to hear laughing, and I love all that. But I don't like the term brat handler or brat tamer, because my feeling is that if you want to tame them, then you want to take the brat out of them and then change who they are. And why do you want to? If you want to change who they are, then they're not the right partner for you.
And that's what a lot of that misconception is, a lot of people being like, oh, I want to break them and make them no longer a brat and stuff like that. And that's not, then you don't need to be playing with a brat if that's what you're aiming for. Another, oh, before I forget, when we were talking about unsafe things, um, with consent and the online stuff, another interaction I've seen that is brought on a lot is, and like I talked about my friend who had the people who were in the comments being like, oh, I want to be your sub and stuff, not even knowing him. I do see, unfortunately, I've seen some people that partake in like the kink stuff online on TikTok and YouTube and Reels and things, who are interacting with their followers in a way that makes people think, hey, it's okay for me to interact anybody that's in the kink community online like this. And that's one thing I want to make sure like everybody listening hears is, I understand that like some people are seeing that, and that's TikTok and stuff's their introduction to kink, unfortunately, and they think that it is okay, and it is not. Just like honorifics and things, it is never okay to be interacting with people you see online just because they do kink content, to think that it's okay to have these inappropriate comments and these inappropriate DMs without any kind of consent, or just because they're like, I've seen people talk about, I had a friend that she did a lot of content talking about her age regression and things like that, and then there would people who come in the comments and think that, oh, just because she talked about that online, that it was okay for them to make comments like being like, oh, we'll be a good girl and do this and stuff like that in the comments there. And I like to remind people, yes, I know there are a couple of content creators who will have those conversations when they really shouldn't be, because it's setting a bad example, but it is never okay to be coming up to a stranger in their comments and saying things like that just because you know they take place in the kink world.
I've seen it on TikTok. It's not as bad now, or at least maybe my For You page has saved me. But I used to see, when I first was getting on, a lot of male identifying dominants who would come in, growl, and tell people to drink their water. And everybody's like, oh my God, I wish I had a dominant like you. Like, There is so much more to being somebody's dominant than growling and telling them to drink their
Exactly.
water.
Oh my gosh, yes. Oh my gosh. I have dealt with that misconception. Like I said, the people that'll message me, I can say because I deal with it too. That like, they see the word mistress in certain profiles I have and immediately think, okay, well you're dominant, so I can just do it. And it's like no. I've even had people who, when I'm like, hey, I don't know you, I'm not having this conversation. They'll be like, oh, well then you're not a real dominant because you can't handle me. And I'm like, no, you're. This is just an unconsensual conversation. Um, but I've seen so many people who think that, and like you said, it's a lot of male identifying, typically. And I'm not saying that no female identifying or non-binary identifying, but it is mostly male identifying that I see that will make basically online harems in like Discord chats and things, and they're like, oh well, I'm a dominant to like these 50 women in my Discord. And I'm like, oh my gosh, no you're not. And they do like basic posts. I joined one of them under a fake username just for research purposes a couple years ago, just to see what it was. And that's exactly what they're doing. They're like, oh, drink your water and make sure you have a snack, and you need to be available to send me nudes all day long and blah blah. And it's like, oh my gosh, that is not. You're not a dominant. You're just an asshole who watched a few TikTok videos, with an ego. That is that is what sums that up. And it's really sad because once again, I've also met people who, because they see things like that and that's their introduction to kink, they're like, oh well, I'm not interested in kink now, even though I do want to try these things. I'm scared to because that's what they see. And I think it's why it's so important to debunk a lot of the stuff, because so many people see that stuff and they get scared off when that's not. I've also had people who are like, hey, I'm asexual, but I'm interested in these kinks. And I'm like, like you said, there's 100% platonic. And once again, not every kink is sexual. There are some stuff that is sexual, but it's not all about sex and intercourse and orgasms and things like that. There's power plays, there's dynamics, there's platonic, there's all kinds of things. There's a lot of people who, like I said earlier, there's a lot of powerful men who will hire pro dominatrix, just to be able to turn their brain off, because they're in charge all day and they're making decisions all day and they just want to turn their brain off and have somebody else tell them what to do. It doesn't automatically mean it has to be dirty. Like I know so many asexuals who are in the kink world.
I'd like to. One of the people things that people argue with me, they're like, well, it's in the definition. It's in the definition about kinks. It's turned you on. And I'm going to give credit where credit was due because this is brilliant. And I did not come up with it, but Sunny Megatron talked in her one of her podcast episodes about, look at it this way: kink turns you on, but the turn on doesn't have to be a physical turn on. It could be a mental turn on. It could be an emotional turn on. It's not always about your body. And I think that's it. I get turned on from things that are not sexual all the time. You get excited,
It's
you
a
get so happy, your heart
stimulation.
starts racing. Exactly. And that's how we have to look at kink. You can be stimulated by it without it being a sexual stimulation, which is why a lot of asexual people are into kink.
Exactly. I especially when you look at things like service submissives. I've had a lot of people who are like, well, what's the point in a service submissive? They just want to like cook and clean for you and stuff. And I'm like, first of all, I love that, especially because my love language is acts of service, receiving wise. So like, I always joke that like because I have a friend that we have a platonic setup. She is a service submissive, and we are 100% platonic, nothing sexual at all, nothing romantic at all. And she likes to clean my house, and I buy her gifts, because she likes get it's like an exchange. And a couple of other things, but I don't want to put personal business out there. But trying to be polite. But a lot of people are like, oh well, what's the point? That's not real kink then. And I'm like, yes, it is, because it's mentally stimulating. It's still an act that is giving them satisfaction, just not physically, if that makes sense. I'm trying to explain it the best I can. I try to avoid in the podcast using too much terminology that might throw people off, or if I do use it, I try to make sure I explain it, because you never know if it's somebody, a beginner listening. But yeah, if you don't know what a service submissive is and you're listening, I quick Google search does usually explain that. That's one of the few things that you
So
can Google and get an accurate. But
I will say, service submission is beyond just cooking and
yes,
cleaning. It's
that's what I was,
a A service submissive should be in service to their dominant in whatever way their dominant needs. Like I always joke, I love cooking. I do not need anybody to cook for me. I need an automobile submissive.
Yes,
So I need an automobile submissive who will wash my car, detail it, make sure registration is paid, make sure the gas is in it at all
I've
times.
met people
That's the
that
service I need.
yes, I've met people that are service submissives who do things as simple as managing somebody else's bills for them. I've met service submissives that do things like drive them places, organize appointments. There's a wide array. Sorry, my speech
Yeah.
impediment is here today. It's a wide array of different services, and that's like I said, it's the acts of service. It's still mentally stimulating. It's still giving them satisfaction. It doesn't have
They
to
get
always
pleasure
be
of doing for somebody else.
exactly. It's that feeling of they're getting that feeling of gratification. Just like I get a feeling of gratification from gift giving, which a lot of people get confused with like me wanting a sugar baby. That is not the case. It's a completely different thing. I am not rich enough for a sugar baby. Maybe like a Splenda baby, but like not a sugar baby. Um, but I get gratification from going out. I'm very custom with my gifts. I have like so many notes in my phones. Like every single contact I have like notes of what they like, of what they enjoy. I get enjoyment from their excitement of receiving these things. And it's not. Um, a lot of people are like, oh, but that's not like physically satisfying. And I'm like, well, for me, and then that's another thing is it's everybody's different. A lot of people that bring up the whole, oh, well, why are you doing this instead of that? It's not every single thing is going to be satisfactory to every single person. Everybody's different. It's just like eating. Everybody's not going to have the same favorite dish or enjoy the same foods. And some people have allergies. And some people, like I always compare like allergies to like hard boundaries versus some people who that same thing that you're allergic to, the other person could eat like 6 pounds of. It's everybody has different taste.
And it's people have to think about like in your day-to-day life, you get joy and happiness and contentment and fulfillment from a lot of things that are not sexual. So why wouldn't you expect that to be the same thing in a kink world? We get pleasure out of a lot of things that have nothing to do with sexuality, right? I'll cook something for somebody, and when I see the smile on their face and then their plate's clean because they've enjoyed it, that brings me joy.
Exactly.
It's not sexual.
Exactly. I that and that's the one big thing. I really wish like my top there's a lot of things I want to debunk about the kink world, but like my top one is the fact that it doesn't have to be sexual. It doesn't have to be um it doesn't have to be romantic either. It doesn't have these aspects that a lot of people think. And once again, the 50 Shades of Grey, a lot of people took it as, and like you said, it's supposed to be a romance novel, but a lot of people took it as, oh, it's just straight smut. And like I remember seeing pictures at the time where it was like a meme and it said men watching porn at home, women reading it in public, and it would like be a picture of somebody reading 50 Shades of Grey. And I'm like, that's what's not straight porn. It's a novel. There is a difference there. I remember there was even guys, particularly incels mostly, that I saw who would argue. They'd be like, why can't I watch porn in public if women are reading 50 Shades of Grey in public? And I'm like, well, that's two different things. That's two different things.
Yeah,
Um,
if they were listening to an audiobook on speaker where everybody else could hear it, that would also be wrong.
exactly. Yeah, there's a difference in reading and that's one thing I always warn people about. Like when I start my podcast, I always warn people. I'm like, hey, reminder, this is 18 plus. And I have people who are like, well, you have it in your bio and stuff. Why do you say that in the beginning every single podcast? And it's like because I want to remind people to not open this up in public, even though I don't talk about like super. I'm not like over here reading off porn or anything. Some of the stories that I have follower submissions of from like their experiences working retail and stuff can get pretty dirty, pretty gross. And I'm like, there could be somebody that's eating that doesn't want to hear that in public, like yeah, I couldn't imagine being eating and just hearing, me
Well,
in the
it
background
comes
talking about
back to
certain things.
consent,
Exactly.
right? Like, did they consent to it? I was So I like to listen to smutty romance audiobooks in the car. And occasionally I will go through a drive-through and forget to lower the volume on my car when I go through the drive-through and I'm like, "Oh shit, hurry up.
And
I turned it off."
that's another thing with the public and consent I have had, because there was an alarming trend that happened where people were practicing play publicly, and people were like, "Oh well, it's fine that I'm walking. It's not like I'm walking other people on a leash. I'm walking," and I'm like, "Yeah, but you're still involving strangers unconsensually." I've seen people make videos, and they always end up going viral, where they're like using a toy in public, and I've seen there was like one video where this girl is soaking through her pants and is in the middle of a mall with like hundreds of people around, and the guy's sitting there recording her while playing with a toy, and people are staring, and they can see it's very obvious, like, to all the adults what is going on. You can see things happening, and people are like, "Oh, well, it's not like people will be like, "Oh, well, she's clothed," and so I'm like, "It doesn't matter. You can see what's going on very obviously, and you've got unconsensual people around." And there's places for people who have exhibitionism or voyeurism to go to have these experiences in consensual. For example, I know a group that rents out an area that's cut off from like the rest of the area, like you can't get in there without being part of it, so that they can have those experiences with consenting adults, but still have that fantasy of like, oh, we're doing it in public kind of thing, without being in the middle of a mall about a bunch of unconsensual people playing, and very obvious. I've seen people be like, "Oh, well, she's clothed, it's fine." And it's like, doesn't matter that she's clothed. It's very obvious what's happening here, and the people around you are not consenting to watching your girlfriend come through her pants in the middle of the mall.
Yeah. It's shit like that that gives the rest of us a bad name because we're fighting that stereotype.
Exactly. Because most of us are not like that. Most of us educate ourselves. Most of us are not having public, and that's what's sad, is that's the videos that go viral. I remember whenever I first started working as a waitress, like 15 years ago. Oh God, I'm old. 15 years. I was working as a waitress, and it was like my first time working waiting tables, and this my manager, it was like my manager or my coach, I can't remember which, but he explained to me. He said, for every one bad review you get, you have to have 10 good experiences to counteract that. Because when you have a bad experience, so if you go to a restaurant and you have a bad experience, most people are rushing to tell their friends. They're rushing. Like, if you get food poisoning, what's the first thing most people do? Post it to Facebook and go tell everybody, "Hey, oh my gosh, I had this bad experience." But when you go to a restaurant and you have a good experience, most people are not rushing to be like, "Oh, hey, I had an average experience," or "Oh, the food was good," or something. You're not saying that every single time you have a good experience, but every single time you have a bad experience, I guarantee you there's people that have heard about it. You've gone and told people. And that's kind of what the kink community deals with, is even though you've got all these people who are doing things right, doing things safely, educating themselves, making sure there's consent involved in everything, making sure things are safe, sane, consensual, all of that, you have that one that goes viral, or everybody hears about this one bad experience. And then everybody else is trying to counteract that and be like, having to like feel it's like they have to prove themselves to be like, "Hey, no, we're not like this." Especially there was, when we did, like, before TikTok, there was, what is it called? Oh, there was this show. Was it My Strange Addictions, or was it New Life or something?
Something like that. Yeah.
Oh, it was something like
Very
that.
interesting people.
And there was one episode of a Findom, and that's, oh gosh, don't get me started on the Findom on TikTok. The Findom episode, and she was like walking him around on a leash in the middle of New York Square in a gimp suit, and doing all this stuff very publicly, and people thought, oh my gosh, people were like, oh, all kink people were doing that. There was all kinds of posts being made and websites being made, and people being like, oh, the whole kink community shoving it down our throats because I'm like, I swear 99% of people are not doing that. We're not walking guys in a gimp suit around New York Square and stuff. I promise. Another one that I've seen with, oh gosh, my brain, the Findom. That is, when we talk about educators, I want to remind everybody, I warn people a couple times a year about this. Please beware of scams, because there is a whole scam that was being run on TikTok where women were saying they were findoms and selling courses to other women, and they would have these fake screenshots of Cash App and be like, "Oh yeah, anybody can do this. All you have to do is text random men and tell them to give you money, and then I'm a findom, and that's what I do." And these women were making so much money off of other women by buying their books, because they'd be like, "Oh, buy my book and I'll tell you how to do it," and then they're not actually telling them anything, because that's not how findom works. But they were telling them, "Oh, just post on Twitter and men will come and run and give you money," and I'm like, "That's not
Oh,
how that
goodness.
works at all." It is, and they made it seem like it was super common and all this stuff. And sadly, I see a lot of scams like that. I see a lot of people who will scam like that. Also with products. Products is another scam. So I'm not sure if you know Mr. Pierre. I
Yes,
love
I
him.
know him.
I love.
I've gotten to meet him in person. He's
I
amazing.
I'm so mad because every time I'm in his area, he's out of town, and like every time he's in my area, I'm out of town. I'm like, This is getting ridiculous." Like we've been running circles for like 3 years now. I love him. He has a shop. He recently had somebody rip off, and I messaged him because I didn't know if he was like, "Oh, I'm aware." They have the it's not the spicy friendship bracelet that I'm thinking of. It's the necklace that they do. That's like
Oh,
a
the Jilly
necklace.
Bean. The Jilly
Yes,
Bean necklace. Yes.
and somebody has made copies of it and is selling it on their page, but it's cheaply made from like some random warehouse factory, and people were ordering it. And I saw a couple of people who were reviewing it, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, this like ended me up in the ER, or I end up getting like cut by this because it wasn't." And I'd be like, "Hey, so this is why it's important to buy from people who are educated on how to make these products,
Right.
because it can be dangerous." For example, Spencer's. Spencer's, I know, has gotten a little bit better. They do have some, like, do have a small handful of body safe products. But back in the day, if you went to the back of Spencer's, those $10 vibrators and stuff, the reason they said for novelty use on the bottom is to get out of liability, because they were not body safe. We would have people come into the ER with chemical
Oh,
burns. We were having people who were having to get skin grafts, getting electrocuted. These, they're super cheaply made, and they were not made with body safe products. And it's why I stress people out so much to please make sure whatever you are buying is body safe. If it says for novelty use in small print, there's a good chance there's a reason for that, and it's trying to get out of liability, because there is a lot of cheaply made products that can cause permanent damage. And there's, like I said, we saw a girl come into the ER who had to have a skin graft because she had used this like cheap $10 dildo from, or sorry, vibrator from Spencer's, and it ended up electrocuting her, which was terrifying. We've had people you can get infections because these things are not sealed properly, and they have all these dyes in them that are not safe for your body. It is so important to please check anything. Like I said, the Mr. Pierre situation, that necklace, somebody had put a review video showing how messed up their neck was because they had gotten it
no.
from that person who had, once again, it's not Mr. Pierre's product. It was somebody who had ripped off Mr. Pierre. I just want to make sure everybody listening knows that. If you want his products are amazing. I've got several of them. I love them. I swear, at this point I might as well just be like an official ad for him, because I'm always advertising for him. I'm like, I love him. I love his products. He's currently working on that app too, to have so,
Quinky.
yeah, Quinky, the app
Yeah.
Quinky, which is going to be a great resource for people to be able to find body safe things. During 2020, that's another issue that I saw a lot of, is people were making toys, like themed toys, because it's now become popular and more mainstream, which I'm glad they took the shame out of this, of themed toys like tentacles and stuff. But there were people who were making them with non-body safe silicone, which was doing harm to people. And another thing I do want to once again remind everybody listening: please, 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 make sure you're using water-based lube on your toys. They will melt if not. um, I,
Oh, goodness.
if you Google pictures of silicone lube on toys, there's so many where people have put silicone lube on toys and they just melt them because of the chemical reaction. So like the toy was safe in the first place, the lube is safe in the first place, but you put them together, not so much. The chemical reaction there is not great.
It's I get wanting to try stuff and maybe having limited budgets, but there's a lot of things that you can still do to try. Uh, we have something, obviously we call it in the biz, we call it pervertibles.
Oh,
where
yes.
you can use stuff from home. And I actually, if anybody is interested in learning more, we have an episode on it on pervertibles. We also have I have a video on demand class about pervertibles. But I mean, go into your kitchen, get your kitchen spoon,
Exactly.
get the spatula. There's so many things you can use. And I always recommend to people, if you are interested in trying something but you're not sure you're going to like it, then don't spend a huge amount of money. Use the pervertibles
For
and try it
example,
out.
one that I use is silicone nail covers. So I have long nails because I have autism, and that is my biggest stem is to sit there and tick with my nails. And so I got, and a lot of people are like, but you're with women a lot, so how the heck are you doing that? Like with these long nails, like, and I use silicone nail covers. If you go on
Hmm.
Amazon, you can buy like a pack of 50, and they are technically supposed to be to remove your nail polish. So you put the nail polish, the cotton swab, and then you put the silicone cover over, and it holds it there. But you can also put them over your nails, and it makes it so you don't feel the nail, and it's a little silicone cover. There's so many. There was back in 2021. There was a page. She ended up losing her page because people kept reporting it. But she did a whole thing on pervertibles where she was going into stores and showing items that could be used for other things safely so you didn't have to spend all of this money, but you were also still being safe at the same time. Because when it comes to insertion, there's a lot of things you have to be careful with, and also things like candles. Please, please, please stop using Bath and Body Works candles. You are going to end up with burns.
Yeah, you have to. There's very specific candles you have to use that don't get too hot.
Oh yeah,
It's yeah,
yeah. I saw at least 3 cases when I worked in the ER, and I have had so many follower submission stories about the candles from ER workers about them burning themselves because they got like a candle from Walmart or something, and it's like that. It burns way too hot. There's also a lot of things that get put into a lot of those candles, to preserve them, to make them smell stronger, and they're not safe for your body.
no, they're not. And you can get. You want to look for like paraffin or soy are your best wax brands, and you can still get those type of candles even on Amazon. You don't have to necessarily get specialty candles, but make sure you're picking either paraffin or soy. Those are the safe
Yes.
ones for you.
Yes. We are almost at the end of time. I wanted to
Oh
give you a
wow.
chance if there's I didn't even realize it because we've been talking so much. I
I,
want
I could talk about this all day. It's why
I
I had my
same
own podcast too.
same. That's why I have to and I'm gonna make sure I put your podcast in the bio for anybody who wants to look you up. I'll have your username and everything in the bio. If there's anything else you want to add before we're at the end of time.
Yeah, I would like to, thank everybody who is putting in the effort to learn, who wants to learn. It's it's the only thing you can do. Mistakes are going to happen, but you learn from them and you fix them and you move on. Don't trust everything you read and hear on TikTok, especially, please.
Oh yes, please.
I also like to tell people vet your educators, and that includes people like me and
Yeah.
Ribbon. Make sure you're vetting us so that when we tell you we know what we're talking about, you can see that we actually do.
Yeah, please don't be afraid to ask either, because I've had people who were like, I wanted to ask, but I was afraid, like I didn't want to come off rude. Please be rude and ask. If you, I don't feel like it's rude at all to ask for your background, your education, things like that. If you're going to an educator, I feel like it's not rude at all. But I know some people are like, oh, well, I don't want to feel rude and ask them like, ask this educator their experience or something. Please ask. I share it at the beginning of every class, but I know some people, you know,
I
they're
I do.
afraid.
I have a pinned TikTok post where I give my bio right on TikTok, because any of us who are ethical educators have zero problem with giving you our bios and
Exactly.
giving you our backgrounds.
Exactly. And that's so massive because I've also, like, once again, the 2020 boom. I've seen some people who are like, well, I'm an educator now because I watched 5 TikToks. I'm like, no, that's not how that works.
Or beware of the ones who try to say, well, I'm not an educator, I don't use that label.
Oh,
Okay, but
yes.
you are educating. And saying you're a coach but not
Oh,
an educator is bullshit.
I know there are some ethical people that use the word coach, but to me that is such a red flag to me every time I hear the word coach because I've had so many bad experiences. But I know there are some people who are ethical and educated and just use that term, but it always scares me when I hear that word coach. I'm like,
Well, especially when they try to say, I'm not an educator,
oh
but
yeah,
I am a coach. I'm like, I'm sorry, but that is what a coach does.
exactly. You're guiding somebody. You're giving them tips. You're giving them education. You're the definition.
But you can find Pink Kink podcast on all the major platforms. We have new episodes that come out every Friday. We are 4 years into this, so we've got a podcast episode on just about every topic at this point. So
And
it's a good way to get free. It costs you nothing to be able to listen to that. So it's a good way to get started.
exactly. And like you said, you also have videos on classes if you're not able to go to in-person classes.
Yes.
I'm gonna go ahead and